Welcome to a Road Less Traveled podcast. I'm Hilary, Haron, your host, and today we have with us Erica Bebout. Erica, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm kind of between a computer and a camera, so if my eyes aren't quite focused, that's why.
Yeah.
I would love for you to give us an introduction of kind of yourself, your title, what you do, and a little bit of your background.
Yeah. So like you said, I'm Erica Bebout. I'm currently in beautiful Ennis, Montana. I own my own horse training business, EB Training, and I'm also a rawhide braider. So I own Bebout braiding as well.
Ooh, cool.
I haven't always done this. I've kind of taken a trip through corporate America and teaching and kind of bounced back and forth a little bit. So I'm originally from California and I bounced to Montana and Iowa. So I've been a lot of different places and done a few different things.
Amazing. Well, when we're talking about a road less traveled, it feels like this is kind of a perfect fit. So your background is, well, what's your formal education in? What's your degree?
Yeah.
Or your
So
degrees?
I went to Cal Poly San Luis Obispo, and I have a degree in ag systems management and a minor in agribusiness.
Okay. So where did that take you? Where'd you go with that?
Yeah. So when I was thinking about graduating, there were people who like went into irrigation or went to manufacturing or like really big equipment dealers. And I really enjoyed working in hands-on applications. So I was looking for more like farming and fabrication type jobs.
Mm-hmm.
And I ended up at a really big Central California agriculture company. And I kind of went directly into the fields at that point.
Okay.
So, yeah.
I want to hear about that. That's one of the things that I find most interesting is that you decided to go the hands-on route as opposed to the corporate route.
Yeah. So because like in our business classes, like they were useful and I like mildly enjoyed them, but I always enjoyed being in the shop. So I started working, like the company I went to work for, they didn't quite know what to do with me at first because they're like, it's really cool that you're super stoked to work for us, but we've never had somebody that comes from college that's a woman that wants to do the hands-on stuff. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of like, we're going to let you tour the company the first year. So I spent a lot of time out in like trials in the orchards, like almonds and pistachios. I spent time working in the warehouses, which is kind of more officey too. And that kind of drove me nuts. And then I went back to the shops and I learned a lot about working on different types of equipment. And I even learned to weld a lot better from those guys. Cause I'd learned in college, but it was very bad.
I mean, that's super cool. My father-in-law is a master welder. And I don't have the first idea other than don't look at the flame. So I think it's really cool that you know how to like make something real with your hands.
Yeah. And it was really interesting because the majority of my day was in Spanish. So I'd only taken 2 years of Spanish in high school. And then my third year, I didn't get along with the Spanish teacher. So I went and became a TA in chemistry instead. So I could just play in the lab for an hour or sleep or whatever. But as I like worked there, I had like, there's just kind of this weird dynamic of where like when you come in, you know a little bit of Spanish, they're like, oh, you don't know very much. And it's kind of, you get made fun of and things like that. And I was like, but I really want to learn. So like if you want help with your English, like you can't keep making fun of me. And like if I want to learn Spanish, you can't, like I can like help you. You can help me learn Spanish and I can help you learn English. So one of the guys, his nickname, because everybody functions on a nickname basis out there, his nickname was Doggy. And he was like about the same age as my dad. And like every day he'd be like, hey, do you want to learn how to weld this today? When I'd like come back from my field visits. And he'd always catch me and be like, do you want to learn this? Do you want to learn that? Because once I showed that I really wanted to learn, he was really excited to help me. That was really fun.
That's really cool. Was there like a great divide between the people from men? I mean, it was mostly men. I'm guessing you were the only woman then.
Yeah. So in the shop and in the field, and I can't say in the office, because in the office you had like PCAs and people who did like the entomology thing or like making the prescriptions for fertilizers. There were women that worked in the office and did that stuff, and they did some field visits, but there were no women who were actively in the shop working or out in the fields, like helping with mechanics or trials or any of that.
Mhm.
They did have crews of women that they were trying at certain points, but even that was kind of a little interesting because they'd be like, well, they can only handle this equipment, so we're only going to put them on this. And I was like, I mean, I guess like I'm supportive that you're bringing women in, but you're only trying these machines because that's all you think they can handle. Like,
Mhm.
so it was very interesting. But yeah, it was just me.
And if it so then you had the one guy who really wanted to, once he realized he could learn from you also, really
Hmm.
wanted to engage. Did you have a lot that were like really what's the word I'm looking for? I want to say obtuse, but like really against it, like really
Yeah.
wouldn't, just refuse to engage?
Yeah. So there were a couple kind of like on the same like kind of status as Doggy because he'd been around for a long time with the company.
Mhm.
And there were a few of the other older guys that were like, why do you want to do that? Like, you could work in the office and stay clean. I was like, or I could work in the office and go crazy. Like,
Yeah.
that works too. Like,
Right.
but not for me.
Mhm.
And there was even people that were like the same level or like type of job description as me that were like, why are you doing that? Like, you don't get paid to like make things. You get paid to like tell them to do things. And I was like, I don't want to do that. I'd rather
Mhm.
know what they're doing to better understand like workflow and efficiencies in order to help them do the best that they can do. And then like everybody will thrive from there.
So your management style is a little bit more engaging.
Yeah.
How did that work with your team? It sounds like they were probably used to a very like dictator type relationship. Did they come around quickly or did it take more time? How did that work?
It took, some people took months. Other people maybe took about a year, a little over a year, because it kind of depended. Like, you had mechanics I worked with a lot, and then you had like the people who operated the equipment and then the supervisors of those people. So the mechanics, because I was around more, came around faster.
Mhm.
And even like the leadership hierarchy, like they eventually realized I wasn't going to listen to them. Like, I listened to them, but I wasn't going to listen to them being like, you should tell them what to do. And I'm like, I'm not going to.
It's just not my
um
style. Thanks
yeah,
though.
exactly. And I was like, great input, but cool, I'm going to keep going. So they eventually kind of were like, that's how it's going to be with me. And I was like, cool, let me be, and we'll kind of work together and do what we can do. And then the field was kind of a different step because you're like removed. You only see them when they're operating in the season. So time wise, it was about a year, but I mean, seeing them, it was probably 2 seasons of work where they're like, oh,
Okay.
okay, like they finally not got with the program. That's not what I'm trying to say, but they like understood where I was coming from. And they're
Mhm.
like, oh, you're actually like pretty cool to work with. And you're not like out here looking for problems and trying to like get me in trouble kind of thing.
Was there a way for you to see like how much more productive your team was than other teams, or was it they were those weren't metrics that they shared openly maybe?
I don't even know if anybody like actively kept track of and shared those metrics because I
Mhm.
know like my boss probably had those numbers in order to report to higher ups, but it was never like, it was so like top down, you do these things, this person does these things. Like, there was no like, how do we make things better in like meetings even. So it was a
Mhm.
very interesting like how things were done at that point. It was very like old school in the worst way.
I think
um
it's cool that you stuck to your style and, navigated that way. I think the world needs more of that. But now you own your own business in another state, so it didn't stick.
yeah.
So what happened? Why leave that position?
Well, so in 2016, there was a drought, and I was one of the younger ones, and I got laid off.
Uh,
So, but I was also looking to switch industries at that point.
Mm-hmm.
to leave agriculture, just because like I really loved a lot of what I did, but a lot of it was just like, even though it was in the field or like in a shop, it was just dumb office politics and everybody getting in pissing contests about things. I'm like, I don't want any part, like I just want to help people do things better and have like the company do better because of
Mm-hmm.
it. Like I don't want to participate in anybody's games or allegiances or loyalties or that kind of thing. So um getting laid off was like a blessing and a curse kind of thing. Like
Yeah.
in the moment you're like, oh
What do I do
man,
now?
yeah, great, everything I was working on and thought was going fine is not going fine kind of thing. So and then after that, like I knew I didn't want to go back into that type of agriculture, but I still really like, I learned a lot of welding. I learned about like management practices and orchards and things like that and kind of how business operated. And the short version of it is I was working at a kind of middle place job where I was selling steel. And one of the guys came in, we were just talking at the counter. And he's like, what are you doing here? I was like, well, I need a job. So that's why I'm here.
Like, I'm actually working. Thanks.
Yeah.
What does it look like I'm doing?
Yeah, exactly. And then he's like, but no, like you, like, have you thought about teaching? And I was like, teaching? Like, don't I have to go back for like 4 more years of school at that point? He's like, no. They have these things called emergency credentials. So I went down that path at that point, and I ended up teaching high school for 2 years in California after that.
What is it? An emergency credential?
Yeah. So if you're in the CTE fields, so career technical education,
Yes.
welding, ag, cooking, all that kind of stuff, or industrial like drafting.
Automotive falls under that
What'd you
category.
say?
Too. Automotive falls in that
Oh,
category.
yeah. So if you have 10,000 hours, because that number, I can't remember where it came from, but that's the number of hours you need to be an expert on something. So if you have 10,000 hours of experience, you can go and do your like pedagogy and your other like teaching, like how do students think, like how do you approach education, that type of stuff, the theory. You can start teaching as you take those classes.
Oh, cool. Okay.
Yeah, so
well, that's news to me. I learned something new today. Look at you teaching still.
Yeah. Forever is what I feel like.
So then where did you start teaching it? You said at a school in California?
Yeah, so I was in Hanford, California, so just outside Fresno.
And what were you teaching?
I had the most amount of subjects for the new teachers at that point. So I was teaching Ag Mechanics 1, Ag Mechanics 2, an Intro to Agriculture course, and an Animal Science course.
Oh, wow. That's
so
incredible.
So the Animal Science was kind of like an Intro to Biology, and then like the Ag Mech 1 and 2 were like a wood shop metal construction-ish course. I kind of tailored it to whatever the kids were interested in. Like we still hit the standards, so I wasn't breaking any rules, but I kind of pulled them every time we were about to start a new subject, what they wanted.
Was that well received? Did you enjoy that?
It took a little bit to get them to like make a choice or like justify why they wanted something. And even like, I guess skipping ahead, I taught high school in Montana also, and like during the pandemic. But like I used to, not necessarily as a time killer, but like as like an intro to a subject, I'd say, okay, like here are the keywords you can use to Google. And I want like 4 slides on it. Like, what is it? What did you learn? Like a couple pictures. And kids would have meltdowns about it, like high school kids. So they're like, that's so broad. Like, do you have a rubric? Do you have like any more words or any of this? I was like, the world is your oyster. Like,
I'm teaching you how to think for yourself with the tools that are available to you right now.
Yeah. And it blew my mind because it's like, I guess I kind of grew up where like Google was new for a little bit when I was younger. So it was the cool thing that you just like slam something in it and you learn something. But people or kids who've had it for a really long time, it was just a really interesting thing. But like by the end, when I did like like the end of the school year, a couple questions like, what was your favorite part, least favorite part? And like, if you could do something again, or like, what was your favorite like subject kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And it was really shocking to have a lot of them say like, you taught me how to look for new information.
That's incredible, especially
Mhm.
in today's
Yeah.
world.
Because it's all out there, it's available, but it still blows my mind that they didn't know how to look for things. And it's so
What a,
interesting.
but like, what a cool impact to have on somebody's like
Yeah.
life, like to you
Mhm.
taught them an actual skill that they are going to get out of their education, which I think we're lacking, but that's another episode anyway.
Yeah.
Like as a society.
Yeah. I agree.
So you taught for a while
Mhm.
in California and then decided to move to Montana, or
No,
did
no,
something else in California?
there's another skip along the way.
Okay.
Um, as a teacher, as a high school teacher,
Mhm.
there's a lot of like state standards and things and all of that, whatever.
Flaming
Not
hoops to
particularly.
jump through.
Yeah, like exactly. That just gets smaller and smaller. And if you can't make it, it's your fault.
Hmm.
So, but I love teaching and education. So I was like, okay, like I'll just go to grad school and see if I can teach at a higher level at that point. So I applied to grad schools. I got into grad school, Iowa State University, and I went in their ag systems technology for about 2 years. Spoiler alert, I didn't finish. Um, so we got to the point like in the pandemic and like the way my major professor was being, like when the pandemic happened, and I'm sure you experienced this too, you're like what are we doing? Like do I need to keep doing this? Or
Yeah.
do I need to like change directions? And it's one of those things where I'm like, man, I'm really not happy. So we moved to Montana to kind of try something different. And I taught high school again at that point. And then everybody else moved to Montana. And
Oh,
then because we had planned to move, like summer of 2019 was when we were planning to move, early summer of 2020 at that point.
mhm.
Um, but then March happened. We were like, I guess we still go through with this, like, well, because nobody knows what's going to happen. And then we got out here, and then it just kind of drug on for such a long time, and everybody wanted to do remote work, so they moved to one of the most beautiful places in the country.
Yeah.
And yeah, so we were there for a year, and then moved back to Iowa just because it was so unaffordable to live and like grow and do things.
Hmm.
And then I I taught the year in Montana, and then in Iowa I actually worked in like more corporate ag at that point for like a little over 3 years before coming
Okay.
here. With for a technology company that does GPS steering solutions, harvest solutions, planting. So like I told myself I'd never go back to the field side, so I went
Mhm.
to the other side because I thought
Okay.
that grass was somewhat greener.
So like the technical side, not necessarily the administrative side.
Yeah, exactly. Like I just did the things.
What did you work on?
Um, so my first year I was in training because education kind of led me down that route. And I was like, oh, I still want to keep teaching. So I did a lot of, they have a program that where you can like map your fields and create prescriptions. So I did a lot of the virtual trainings for that. To teach people how to do that. And then once I transitioned out of training, I worked in product testing,
Hmm.
where you have all the software engineers that develop products, and then they go to a product tester to make sure there aren't bugs or defects. And then like I would kick stuff back to them, and it would be this back and forth until you met a certain standard of quality. And then it moved on from there.
Okay. So you did that for a little while, and
Mhm.
then what?
Then now I'm here.
Now you're here. So now
Yes.
you're back in Montana,
Hmm.
living the good life.
Yes.
So you've worked. I feel like there's a piece of the story we skipped somewhere along the way. You worked for an ag company in California, and the relationship didn't end well. And
Yeah.
I want to talk a little bit about how you navigated that,
Hmm.
because the being a female in a male dominated industry and then doubling down on that perspective going into ag, and then like navigating things in the way that you saw fit as opposed to the way that they wanted you to do things,
Mm-hmm.
had to be hard for you, like personally, like interpersonally anyway.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And then add on what I mean, I'll kind of spoil the story, like a work situation that was unfortunate.
Mm-hmm.
Can you give us a little bit of perspective on that? Like, how'd you deal with that? How did it affect you, like personally, mentally,
Mm-hmm.
physically?
Well, it like 2016 was a really bad year, hard year, low year. Like all the like when people talk about rock bottom, like it was just kind of like all these things I've done that like were mildly appreciated, but like at that point you're like definitely not appreciated at that point. Like that was not the direction they were going. So it made me question everything about how I like went through things. So
Mm-hmm.
I spent a lot of time chatting with my friends. I had a lot of friends in the ag industry at that point.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them are not there anymore. They were
Yeah.
also in California to kind of reconcile, like, did I do anything like wrong? And they're like, not really. Like, it just wasn't what they wanted. And they were cutting new people and really senior people at that point.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like, you go through this, like, blame yourself for all these things. But at the same time, like, it like made me so mad that I wanted to like be successful, but in a different route. Like I wasn't going to go back and like try to prove myself again because I already felt I did what I could have done at that point.
Yeah.
So, I spent a lot of time out with my horses. At that point, my horses had horseshoes, and a farrier cycle is 6 weeks, but I rode so much around. My horse's shoes were paper thin. So I spent
Oh,
a lot of
dang.
time out and about thinking, just away from everybody, like, what do I want to do? Because at that point, it's kind of a gift. Like, you can do anything at that point. So what are you going to do?
Mm-hmm.
So,
And
yeah.
then that kind of led you away, well, away from California, really.
Yeah, because it like I love California. California is great, but it like that experience in ag, like I don't want to work in the fields again. So I wanted to try teaching and kind of I knew like there's a lot to learn from California, but you can't learn it all. So that's
Yeah.
why I kind of like if a company is going to treat you like that, like why do you need to stay loyal to anything? Like there's
100%.
a level of respect, but loyalty is like for me it's a hard thing. Like look, first there's respect and then there's like I'll do anything for you, but the
Yeah.
respect can't go down. So,
We're at a different place in history, right? Like,
yeah.
uh, and I think that we approach things different. We approach marriage different. We approach our careers different
Mhm.
because a lot of things that were born of necessity aren't necessary anymore. There's a lot more access to information. People are a lot more mobile. So
Mhm.
if you're going to be loyal to a company that's going to treat you crappy,
Mhm.
they better be doing something really, really, really good to keep you in
Yep.
that situation. Otherwise, what, like you said, what's the point?
Yeah, exactly. And that's like with anything that any direction I've gone with my career, it's always been like, there's still like this little part of it where I'm like not super loving how I'm being treated
Yeah.
because there's XYZ why they can't do it. And that's why like at this point, like I work for myself because if I'm unhappy with my boss, well, I just look in the mirror and say, it's
Nah, look
you.
at you. Look at you.
Yep. Can't run away from that.
So how has it been being entrepreneurial in, kind of shifting where like your formal education is and all, that kind of stuff,
Mhm.
and then shifting to what you're doing now?
It's been kind of hard because you're used to like you can like meet these metrics at your job and it's not necessarily all written out for you, but a lot of it is, and you just kind of follow like your steps and it's like a board game at that point.
Mhm.
But entrepreneurship is not that
So,
whatsoever. So, but it's been really cool because I can like I've had all these thoughts that have gone on for years, and like my horsemanship, and even like what I've learned in braiding, where I have these ideas, or had these ideas, and now I can do things with them, which is really exciting. So through the difficulties, there's like the bits of excitement that keep propelling it forward for me.
So now you're training for
Mm-hmm.
horse training.
Yep.
Well, we'll talk about that and then we'll talk about the braiding. So
Yeah.
horse training, how does that
Mm-hmm.
work for somebody that wants your services? Where do they find you? How do they get to you? What does that process look like?
Yeah. So the majority of my clients, I would say about 90% have been word of mouth so far, which is kind of how the horse industry functions.
Mhm.
You do have like the social media to like have like kind of traceability. Like they can go back and look and see like, just because you're saying these things when I meet you in person, like, does it
Mhm.
track? But generally word of mouth. I've had some people through my website go through and inquire just through like a Google search, and they'll like type horse training. And then when I was in Iowa, they would type Ames, Iowa,
Yeah.
and then submit an inquiry. And then some people have kind of asked me questions on like Instagram too.
Mhm.
That's kind of peppered in, few and far between.
I mean, that's cool.
Mm-hmm.
How do people once they pick you, how do they get their horse to you?
So if they're locally, my husband owns a transportation company,
Oh,
so
cool.
he can go pick them up, or I use my trailer and then I can go pick them up also. Or at the previous place I was at in Iowa, a lot of those people that either took lessons or they like put their horse in partial training, they were
Uh-huh.
already at the boarding facility, which was really nice because I'd say like, well, we can work these things out to meet your needs and your horse's needs, or if you're going on vacation, they need work. It worked out really well.
Well, that's great. That's amazing. And it's something you're passionate about. And
Yeah.
as you were talking about how you coped with, leaving like the corporate ag industry and like going out on your horse and like finding yourself and thinking
Yeah.
about it, like, and now you're doing something that you're passionately
Mhm.
aligned with. Have you explored the like, somebody paying you for 6 weeks to go like live with their horses and train them like on site, or is it all they come to you?
Um, there are some like traveling trainer positions, or like you'll have to like the in the English world, you have people live like up in the Northeast during the summers, and then they go down to like Aiken or Florida during the winters. Um, I mean, maybe eventually. I know there's a trainer I really love, Doug Jordan. He lives in Texas, but the majority of the year he does like 2 weeks, like in this region, this region, this region, kind of
Oh,
thing.
that's cool.
Yeah, so maybe in the future, but like I really enjoy where I'm at right now. And even like people think Montana winters are really hard, and they can be. I'm not discounting that. But you can ride outside longer than what you'd think out here because
Mhm.
the snow is kind of powdery, and the weather, as long as you're layered, you're fine. So I plan to train probably 10 to 11 months out of the year, because January and February usually are garbage.
Okay. Well, that's pretty incredible. So you
Yeah.
have like it's not like seasonal either. So you have like your work is not seasonal. You can pretty much do it throughout the whole year.
Yeah. And that, like, I guess the type of work kind of changes. But yeah, like, there isn't, some people say, well, horse training is like spring, summer, fall, and the winter's off. And it's like, well, like, if you really want to have a horse prepared for spring,
So is
you
my
have to do
diet.
things.
Just kidding.
But you have to do things over the winter. Like, that's how it works. So it's, and like horse keeping is year round too. Like, they're
Mhm.
animals, so they need care. So it's, that's where my philosophy can vary a little bit from people, because they think, oh, like you just start prepping in like March. And it's like, I mean, you can, but like you're really whiplashing at that point, not doing the horse justice.
Well, and that's
So,
that's what I love about like your whole journey is that you're approaching it from a little bit of a different perspective of
mhm,
the whatever it is that feels aligned with you, and knowing that you can make an impact through, your own approach versus what everybody else thinks or what everybody else says.
Hmm. Yeah, it as a kid, I didn't love being told what to do. I was probably kind of a hellion child. Sorry, mom and dad. Um, but and even like certain teachers like would be like, well, she's argumentative, or she does this, or she just kind of does her own thing. And it's like, but I always like finished all my work, and then I like didn't want to like I wanted to do what I wanted to do at that point. So like
Yeah.
now I'm like living that like I can do what I want to do, and it's so nice. And it like I learned so much from all of those experiences, but it's nice we finally come to this.
That's amazing. I want to hear the advice you would give other women who were considered like hellions or different or, whatever.
Oh, I would tell them that you don't have to settle for good enough. It's okay to want more. Like, yeah, you can be grateful for things, but if it's not really making you feel good on the inside, you don't have to keep doing it and feeling like 75% of yourself. Like, why not stretch out and try to do something or be a part of something that makes you feel like you're 100% of yourself?
A huge thank you to our incredible guests for sharing their stories, wisdom, and breaking down barriers with us. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe and leave a review. Your support means the world to me and helps spread the word about the amazing women paving the road less traveled in male-dominated industries. If you have suggestions for a future guest or topic you'd like me to explore, please reach out on social media. I'd love to hear from you. Follow me on your favorite social platform for updates and behind the scenes. Keep pushing boundaries, challenging norms, and lifting each other up.